So this week we read about the flood, and the Torah says that after the flood, Noach brought sacrifices, thank God for saving him from the flood. And the Torah says that he brought sacrifices from the animals which are, quote, tahor, animals which are pure. Now, the question is, the Torah wasn't given yet. So why are we calling these animals pure? The Torah is referring to the kosher animals. Noach brought sacrifices from the kosher animals, but there was no Torah given yet. So why are they called pure, kosher? There's no Torah yet. So Rashi explains the animals that are going to become kosher after the Torah will be given, and there'll be a classification of the various animals. So the Torah says that these animals will eventually be in the category of the kosher animals. So the question is, we find in Gemara in Zvachim, on page Kuftas Vavam and Bais, the Gemara says that in the Mishkan you were allowed to bring sacrifices that were kosher, but you could not bring a sacrifice that had a blemish. The Gemara discusses that before the Torah was given, there was an allowance to bring animals which were blemished, animals who were missing a foot or whatever. Those animals were acceptable before the Torah was given. However, the Gemara there says that the animals that were going to be non-kosher, even before the Torah was given, they were not acceptable before the Torah was given as a sacrifice. That's the way it comes out from the different texts in the Gemara. The Shittim Konvetzes, and it seems from Rashi also that the correct text is, why are these animals called kosher? Because they're going to be kosher. The question is, there's no Torah yet, so why are we classifying them now based upon the future? What does that have to do with now? We don't find that the other laws of the Torah about blemishes apply to the sacrifices before the Torah was given. So how come specifically the laws of kosher, how come those laws affect the sacrifices that were offered before the Torah was given? So to understand this, you may want to offer and say, well, Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, they kept the Torah before the Torah was given. So maybe Noach did the same thing, but it doesn't say that. It says, our forefathers, they kept the Torah before the Torah was given. We don't find that Noach kept the whole Torah before the Torah was given, only our forefathers. So what is the reason that there is this special connection between the sacrifices specifically to the giving of the Torah? That even before the Torah was given, the sacrifices have a connection, they're linked to the era post-Sinai, and therefore even before the Torah was given, they have to have this, they have to be kosher animals, otherwise they're not accepted. Well, what's the thing over here? So to understand this, we have to first explain the whole meaning of a sacrifice, what a sacrifice is about. It says in the Torah that by offering a sacrifice, you achieve atonement. You're cleansed from the mistake that you made. That means that a sacrifice, a korban, must have in it something that's greater than the Torah. Because you violated the Torah, you messed up in Torah. How do you fix a blemish in Torah? Through the sacrifice. It must be that the sacrifices have in them a component that's even beyond Torah. Like, for example, we find that tshuva, a person returns to Hashem sincerely, he causes his sins to be erased, or even more, he turns to Hashem with love, then his sins are transformed to becoming mitzvahs, because it was those sins themselves that generated this feeling of yearning to Hashem that he now has. So his sins become a positive thing. Because of his sins, he now has a greater yearning and closer to Hashem. But the reason why teshuvah has a power to transform these mistakes, because teshuvah is beyond Torah. We find this idea that teshuvah is beyond Torah in many places. There's a story about this soul and throughout Chazal, Yaakov, Shimon, and Tillim, and other places, we find this story about a soul that sinned. And the soul that sinned trying to fix itself up. First it goes to wisdom. Wisdom, what should I do? I've sinned. Wisdom says, this is what you should do. And it goes to prophecy, this is what you should do. Wisdom says you should die, and prophecy says you should suffer. Shalom. And Torah says it should be a sacrifice, and then he goes to God himself, and God himself says, do teshuvah. So that means that the advice, so to speak, that Hashem is giving is beyond the limitations of Torah. And Torah is the word of Hashem. So what do we mean when we say that there's advice of God and there's advice of Torah? The answer is that there is a way Hashem limited his instruction to us in the Torah. And there is the connection of Hashem to us, which is even beyond the limitations of Torah. And that's why teshuvah, because teshuvah reveals that bond we have with Hashem. As the Torah says, you are my children, Hashem says. Whether you sin or you don't sin, you're still my children. There's nothing we could do to erase that bond with Hashem. So even though we've made a mistake, and even though it seems we've torn asunder our connection to God, that's only externally. But there's a deeper bond we have with God that cannot be broken. And that bond with God is revealed through teshuvah. That's why teshuvah rectifies the sins, because teshuvah reveals the deeper bond we have with Hashem that's beyond limitations of Torah. Now, you might ask, it says in the Torah itself to do teshuvah. Teshuvah is something in Torah too. So how can we say that teshuvah is beyond Torah? The answer is that everything that Hashem wants us to know is in the Torah. But there are some things in Torah which are even beyond Torah. The Torah reveals to us teshuvah. Yes, teshuvah is a mitzvah. But teshuvah is not only a mitzvah. Teshuvah has in it a component that's beyond Torah. That's what this teaching in the Alkut Shimoni is saying. There's the response of Torah, and there's the response of God. The response of Torah isn't to do teshuvah. The response of Torah is to bring a sacrifice. Only the response of God is do teshuvah. That means there is a way Hashem's words are limited according to the rules and the parameters of Torah. Then there is a response that's beyond the parameters of Torah. And that's teshuvah. Teshuvah does that. Teshuvah rectifies mistakes because teshuvah reaches into us and reveals the bond we have with Hashem, which is even beyond the bond we have through Torah. And a similar thing is achieved also through sacrifices. Although sacrifices cannot fully erase any transgression, however, sacrifices do mitigate transgressions. Most sacrifices are brought for sins that are done by accident. So the fact that the sacrifice could mitigate the response, the divine consequence that would ordinarily be given for the sin, and the sacrifice causes an atonement, and no longer will there be such a response, the sacrifice cleanses the person. That indicates that the sacrifice has in it a component that is even beyond Torah. And that's why it's able to rectify when a person does something against the Torah. Because the sacrifice has in it something it reveals, just like teshuvah does. Teshuvah reveals our connection to Hashem, which is our bond to Hashem, which is beyond Torah. So too, when a Jew offers a sacrifice to Hashem, it does that to us. We see from the word karban. Karban means closeness. A Jew did something wrong. He separated himself from God. And the karban achieves, he becomes close again with God. The karban reveals his bond with Hashem. He lost the connection. But now, by bringing the karban, he becomes connected to Hashem again. Where does the connection come from? It's because there's a deeper part of him, of the Jew, and Hashem that was always connected. And the sacrifice reveals this bond that a Jew has with Hashem. And therefore, because the sacrifice is something which is higher than Torah, it's beyond Torah. Therefore, even before the Torah was given, we find a similar impact that the sacrifices have. And that's why, specifically about the sacrifices, do we find that they have the same laws as post giving the Torah. That they had to be kosher animals. They have a connection to that era. They're before the Torah was given, but they're about something which is the sacrifices before the Torah was given have something of the sacrifices post signing, some element within that. And because they are about revealing something deeper that's beyond limitations of Torah. We find this idea of Noach being connected to the Jewish people in our prayers in Rosh Hashanah. In the prayers of Rosh Hashanah, we have three sections of verses that we recite. The Talmud says you should recite verses of God's sovereignty in order that I should be king over you. You should recite verses about remembrance, God says, so that remembrance of you, remembrance of the Jewish people, should come before me for good. So, and then we also recite verses about the shofar. One of the verses that we recite is V'games Noach b'yav v'zacharta. You also remember Noach with love. 1 second. I'm not trying to evoke God's mercy on all mankind. I'm trying to, that our remembrance of the Jewish people, should arise before God on the day of judgment for good. So why are you mentioning Noach? So our forefathers, Adam and Yaakov, are the fathers of the Jewish people. Noach is a father of all mankind. He's a father of Bnei Noach, the whole world. So Noach has in himself two components. He has an inner, from Noach comes the Jewish people as well. The reason we mention Noach is because Noach has an inner dimension. There's an external dimension of Noach, which is related to all of creation. And that's what all creation is called. All people are called children of Noach. And there is an inner dimension of Noach. How Noach is the father of Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. He is the father of our fathers. He has in himself the Jewish people as well. He's the grandfather of the Jewish people. So Noach has an external dimension and he has an inner dimension. So when Noach brought the sacrifices to God, he's bringing sacrifices to God because God saved him from the flood. Why did God save him from the flood? We see from our prayers of Rosh Hashanah, it wasn't that God was saving Noach because God was just saving all mankind. It was because of the Jewish people. Because out of Noach will come the Jewish people, that's why God rescued Noach. So God was, so to speak, conscious of it, thinking about the progeny of Noach. And Noach will be the grandfather of the Jewish people. And that's why God remembered Noach. So we're highlighting in our prayers, not that God remembered Noach, but that God remembered Noach only because he remembered us. Because when God thought about Noach, he thought about the Jewish people. So that means, after the flood is over, and Noach brings a sacrifice to God, his sacrifices are connected to God's remembrance of him, which is really remembrance of his inner dimension, which is really remembrance of the Jewish people. Noach's sacrifices were about the remembrance of the Jewish people that we recite Rosh Hashanah. And that's why his sacrifices mirrored the sacrifices at post Sinai, and that's why his sacrifices specifically had to be kosher animals. That explains the Gemara in Zvachim, according to the Gersa of the Shikul Betzis. This will also help us understand something else. It says that the custom is that a Jewish child, to begin studying Torah, he studies Torah specifically from the tractate, from the book of Vayikra, the book of sacrifices. Why does he study Torah from the book of sacrifices specifically? The Talmud says those who are pure should be involved in pure things. Since sacrifices are called pure, and Jewish children are called pure, let the pure ones learn about the laws of sacrifices. Let the pure ones be involved in the pure. Now, why are sacrifices called pure? Different explanations are given. One explanation is because when you bring a sacrifice, it purifies it. Okay. So, but that's not the sacrifice itself. It sounds like from the language of the Torah, let children study what the sacrifices, because the sacrifices are pure. And the answer is, again, it's the same point. We're talking about children. We're talking about people who are not yet obligated to keep the Torah. They don't have an obligation to keep the Torah. Their connection to Torah is beyond the obligation of Torah. The obligation of Torah begins at the age of 13 for a boy and 12 for a girl. So the fact that they keep the Torah before their age of 13 is sort of like the era before the Torah was given. And there's still a bond that these children have with Hashem, not just a bond, but it says in the beginning of Ecclesiastes, in the beginning of Koheles, King Solomon says, Hevel, Hevel, vanity, 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 everything is vanity. He says vanity 7 times. And where it says that the world exists only because of the emptiness, because of the vanity, because of the air of children. Hevel, Hevel. Why does the world exist? Because of the air, of the breath of children studying Torah. Although there's no obligation. So just like the sacrifices, even before the Torah was given, they have some kind of a connection to that which is higher than Torah, and the sacrifices which will be offered after the Torah was given. So too children are in the same classification. They're pure children. They have they have in them something, a connection to Hashem, which is underscored by the fact that they're not yet obligated to keep the Torah, and they're still studying Torah anyways. Why is that? It's because of the bond of a Jew with Hashem. Really, you'd think that education would be a major cornerstone in Torah, but the Torah itself does not talk about education. The Torah talks about teaching Torah to your children, but not education. The Torah says, teach Torah to your children. It doesn't say that you should train your child to say brachas. You should train your child to put on tefillin. You should train your child to keep Shabbat. It doesn't say that in the Torah. That's a rabbinic ordinance. And the reason why it's only rabbinic is because, in the perspective of Torah, this is something which is beyond Torah. this is the Jewish connection to Hashem, and therefore he wants his child to be educated in the way of Hashem. It's not because he's obligated to. It's because of the bond of a Jew and Hashem. It's kind of like our connection to our belief in Hashem. Why? We don't believe in Hashem because we're supposed to, because we're told to. The reason we believe in Hashem is because a Jew and Hashem are one. So in a similar way, the commandment that God gives, the reason for the custom for Jewish children to specifically study the laws of sacrifices is because, says the Talmud, those who are pure should be involved in pure things. Children who are pure, have not been tarnished, any mistakes before by mitzvah, they should learn the section of Torah which is about purity, which is about revealing something in us that is beyond the external facade that our thoughts, speech, and action may bring us. But children should be involved in learning the part of the Torah which is beyond the external dimension. There is a connection we have with Hashem through Torah, but then there's a deeper connection. The Zohar says it this way. The Zohar says there are three things which are bound with each other: the Torah, the Jewish people, and Hashem. The Zohar says there are three knots, and we have three things. You only need to have two knots. You have the Torah, the Jewish people, and Hashem. So you would think you need to have two knots. One knot to connect to the Torah, and one knot to connect the Torah to Hashem. But the Zohar says there are three knots. Why are there three knots? There are three knots, there are three bonds. Why are there three bonds if there are only two items? We need connected to the Torah, we need connected to the Torah, and the Torah is connected to Hashem. And the answer is that there is a connection a Jew has to Hashem which is even beyond limitations of Torah. Something which is higher than Torah. That even though we've made a mistake in the Torah, we still feel we want to connect to God. Why do we have that feeling? Why do we want to connect to God even though we've lost the connection to the Torah? The answer is because we're God's children anyways. There's a deeper bond. So, in short, what did we learn today? We asked a question on Rashi. Rashi says that the animals that will be pure were offered by Noach. And the question is, why is that pertinent now before the Torah was given? These animals will eventually be pure. Why is that important? We answered that a sacrifice has something in it that's beyond the limitations of the parameters of Torah. And that's why a sacrifice is able to achieve atonement. Just like tshuva can accomplish atonement, so can a sacrifice accomplish the same thing. And therefore, to a certain extent, for various that are done by accident, and therefore, even before there is the giving of the Torah, the sacrifice brought already had some of that, a trace of that energy, and therefore they had to be also kosher animals. And this also explains the custom of why specifically Jewish children study the pure subject of the sacrifices, because again, the bond of the Jew and Hashem is beyond the obligation of Torah. Children are not obligated to keep Torah. They're involved in the study of Torah. Yes, their fathers and mitzvahs to teach them, but therefore they're obligated de facto. What's the word? They're obligated also because their fathers teach them Torah. But that's not why Jewish children study Torah. Jewish children study Torah because the essence of a Jew is one with Hashem. Even though there's no official mitzvah they're gaining and there are no brownie points that they're achieving, but a Jewish child is one with Hashem. And therefore, what does a Jewish child study? He studies the part of the Torah which highlights the bond we have with Hashem, which is even beyond the parameters of Torah, the laws of the sacrifices. They're able to achieve this kind of purity. Any questions, comments? Thank you, everyone.
Egg.
All right, we'll stop here.
Okay.